Hi there, and welcome to chapter 3 of this analysis project. Before we begin, my name is Michael. I work as a data scientist, and in this project series, we've been analyzing the topic Africa and the Cardinals falling. Just a little background for those who are probably joining us for the first time. So, Cardinals is a term I have coined to refer to the most dominant economic, the most dominant nation in a region economically. So, how this analysis has been happening is we started off with the UN Geo Scheme regions, and Africa, per the UN Geo Scheme, has 5 regions. And so far, we have covered two, namely Central Africa and East Africa. So, in this video, we'll be looking at South Africa and essentially, we'll be looking to see which is the most dominant nation, the cardinal in this case, and the number two nation, which we'll call the silent contender to evaluate whether the dominant nation is stable in its position or the silent contender is probably about to usurp it in terms of the the position in the whole region. So I highly encourage you to watch the previous two videos and exclusive of this chapter 3, there is two remaining ones. So let's begin with Southern Africa. So a little overview is we'll go through the population, insights from the population after looking at the countries in Southern Africa, just to acquaint ourselves with them. Then we'll also look at the GDP and real GDP growth rate, after which we'll focus on inflation and the USD forex rate. So there's insights that we're going to find out from this presentation. And then finally, we'll have a conclusion slide where we'll compare and contrast the cardinal and the silent contender on each of these metrics that we've analyzed to determine whether or not the silent contender is in a position to usurp the cardinal. So to begin, Southern Africa has these 5 nations. So we've got Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini. And shout out again to World Atlas for this really good map that zones in on each region and color codes them, excluded from the rest. So these are the nations to keep in mind even as we proceed. And remember again, this is part of the UN Geo scheme. Now, focusing on the region's population, being the smallest, perhaps the smallest region in Africa, just based on the number of nations, it has 5, as we've previously seen. And as of end of last year, the population was as follows. So South Africa had 87.71% of the whole region's population. That's at 62 million people. And then the next one was Botswana with 3 million. And you can see Botswana and Namibia have near similar uh, total number of people. And then you've got Lesotho and Eswatini to terminate the proportion here. When you consider the annual trend, you can see that in Southern Africa, the population has been growing by approximately 1 million people every year. So you can anticipate that at the end of 2024, there will likely be 71 million people in this region. And then we now move to the total GDP. So just focusing on the total GDP generated by each of these countries by the end of 2023, which is our recent immediate point of reference that's relevant for this. You can see that Southern Africa generated $421.33 billion. And you can see that of this, South Africa accounted for 90% of this figure. So you can imagine what the region, a lot of the region's output comes from South Africa per this. And then after 8, you can see that the second nation was Botswana with an output of approximately $21 billion, which is only about 5%. So you can see just how lopsided the situation is here comparing South Africa and the rest. And then if you consider the GDP trends, there's a bit of variability, both if you're looking at nominal GDP or the real GDP growth. So you can see if you consider the following periods, 2013 to 2016, the value was declining annually, as you can see there. And then from 2017 to 2018, it increased. And then again in 2019 and 2020, it declined. And then 2021 to 2023, 2021 was the highest in a sense, but then the last 2 years have been showing a decline. So in essence, the GDP, the insight that we get from here is that GDP, both at a real GDP growth level and the nominal GDP, has been declining since 2021. And so it will be interesting to see if this trend continues into 2024, our current year. And then when you zone in on the top two nations, you can see that South Africa, as we've just seen, accounts for that 90%. And so you can see here just how far above it is from Botswana. In essence, it's like 20x of what Botswana is generating. If you just look at ballpark, if you just compare ballpark between several points along the trend here. And so you can see an interesting thing is even though South Africa has been the clear cut cardinal, it's had some steep declines. 2016 is one, 2020 was another. You got the peaks in 2021 as we saw earlier. Also, 2018 was a peak, and there was a previous peak in 2013. For Botswana, it's been relatively stable all through. Yes, it's had its ups and downs, but they've not been as dramatic as those of South Africa. And so, in essence, Botswana can be a loose silent contender here just because of the very big difference by magnitude. And yeah, it would be probably difficult to imagine Botswana usurping South Africa anytime soon, based on what you've seen here. Then we've got the real GDP growth percentage rate for the top two. So you can see our cardinal here is Botswana. For the most part, it's had more growth than Namibia, which is our silent contender here. However, we can see an interesting and important thing is that both these nations have gone through quite a bit of variability. It's just that now for Botswana, the variability has been greater, meaning when it was previously high and it goes low, it goes very low. So you can see, let's say 2013 to 2015, it was at 11.1% growth, then it goes all the way to negative 4.9%. So you can see then it swings again to 7, it starts going down, goes all the way down to negative 8.1, then goes back again to 11.9. So it really keeps switching across board. So from 2021, you can see that Botswana now, because of such the big swings up and down, it swung really low from 2021 to terminate at 3.8% in 2023. Compared to Namibia, who went up in 2022, and even though it slowed down, it wasn't as dramatic as that of Botswana. And so, based on this, we can probably say that Namibia will usurp Botswana in the coming year or two, just because of how the swings of Botswana are taking place from observing history. Then we move to inflation, and here inflation is CPI inflation. And so, considering CPI inflation for the whole region, you can see that what's charted here is the median of the inflation rates for the region. And considering this, you can see there was mean peaks in 2016 at 6.8% and 7.4% at 2022. 2019 there was a drop, but then since 2020 it's been going up, but then last year it also started easing again. So we can say it's had quite high inflation all through, with the lowest being 2019. So when we focus in on the top two nations here, remember, since we're looking at CPI inflation, the lower the better. Generally, the lower the better for inflation. So the ones with the least inflation in this region is Namibia and Botswana. But what here we actually have an interesting case of a cardinal existing and then a silent contender usurping it. So there was kind of an inversion here. So at first, Botswana was the cardinal because it had the lower rate. And as you can observe, the y-axis has been inverted just because of the fact that the lower the better. So we want the better nation to have its trend line at the top. And then as performance continues reducing, the ones they should be at the bottom. So you can see Botswana was better than Namibia in the period 2013 until 2020, and then they crossed positions. So now Namibia, sorry, had lower rates than Botswana, even though they were increasing for the most part. Also, an interesting thing to note is that Namibia's inflation rate has had a standard deviation of 1.45 compared to 2.99 for Botswana. So Botswana has had more variability, even though you can see for Namibia, in that period of 2013 to 2020, it kind of looked like it had more variability. But now, because of the very big swings since 2024, Botswana, Namibia gained on it there. And so, with Namibia as the cardinal, it's unlikely that the highly variable Botswana will firmly usurp it, just because it might go up again, but it'll just swing, just based on this. And also the fact that Namibia has less deviation. Then we move to the USD forex rate for both these nations. So what we observe here again is the lower the exchange rate between a nation's currency against the dollar, the better in terms of the strength of the currency. So here we're saying that Botswana had the strongest currency for analysis period 2013 to 2024, and then second to it was Eswatini. And you can see the rates here 8, 10, 13, 14, 18. They are pretty decent. Again, here the y-axis has been inverted because the lower the better for a nation, or the lower the stronger, just to be more technical. So Botswana has been the cardinal all through, and then Eswatini has been a silent contender. Yes, both rates appear to be trending downwards, which means that they've been losing their strength progressively over time. As you can see, Botswana began at 7.8 in 2013, and now at end of Q1 2024 it was at 13.7, and then for Eswatini started at 8.5 and terminated at 18.9. So this was also an interesting thing. But if you also look closer, you kind of see that whenever they move in the same direction. So for instance, if you look at this period here, 2016 to 2018, going up, going up. Then 2018 to 2020, going down, going down. Then here, going up, going up, going down, going down. So in a sense, they look like they have similarities. And on observing their correlation, they have a strong positive correlation with a correlation coefficient of 0.94. And so, even though this is the case, we just see that Eswatini looks like it has more drastic changes over time compared to those of Botswana. And so, it's unlikely that Eswatini, being the silent contender, will usurp Botswana. Then you've got the same USD forex rate, but now the trend for just 2024. So here it's just the beginning of this year till end of Q1 2024, March 31st, that is. So you can see just how far above Botswana is from Eswatini. And again, the y-axis here has been inverted. So just for this period, we noted that there has been weak positive correlation between both currencies. So here it was at a correlation coefficient of 0.05. But here we can see that again, Botswana has a stronger rate than Eswatini relative to the dollar. And then finally, under the USD forex rate, we consider the trend of stability. So here, what we use to check the stability is what I've called the forex sigma, which is just the forex standard deviation here. And so computing that across the analysis period 2013 through to end of Q1 2024, you can see that stability for Botswana was more than that of Namibia. And you can see that the line is far above it. So it's been the case across board. There's been times, of course, there's been near misses like 2014. And you can even see at 2024, they're kind of close to each other here, 0.1, 0.19. So both are currently reducing in their volatility, but just based on the magnitude between, like for example, you've got 0.3, 0.1, and 0.63 and 0.19. We can see that Namibia is on track to usurp Botswana because of just the magnitude in the reduction compared to what's happening for the Botswana currency here. So even though Botswana is our current cardinal and Namibia is our silent contender, here we have a case where the silent contender might usurp the cardinal. And so now, based on the conclusion, sorry, we come to the conclusion. Just summarize these insights. So we can see for the population, South Africa is the cardinal, with Botswana the silent contender, but we don't see any indication of a falling cardinal here. Uh, for the GDP, you can see again South Africa was the cardinal. We get with that 90% proportion of all the GDP from this region, and the silent contender being Botswana. Again, you don't have an indication of a falling cardinal. For real GDP growth rate, you've got Botswana and Namibia. So Botswana is our cardinal, but because of the variability we spoke of earlier, you can see we went, given that Namibia is a silent contender, it's likely going to get usurped. So here we can say that the cardinal, which is Botswana, is falling and Namibia is positioned to take that place. For inflation, you can see Namibia was our cardinal and Botswana was a silent contender, but there's no indication of a falling cardinal. Then when you look at USD forex rate for both the whole period and just 2024. Botswana was our cardinal, but it was far above the select contender being Eswatini. So again, there's no indication of falling cardinal. And then finally, for the USD forex rate stability, Botswana had the most stable currency than Namibia, but because of the sharp reduction in the volatility of Namibia's currency, there is a likelihood that Namibia will usurp Botswana's currency uh, anytime soon. And then an interesting thing to note is even as this is happening, we know that in Eswatini and Lesotho, there's no elections because these are, in a sense, functional kingdoms. But for the other nations, you can see South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana all have elections this year. So, of course, because of the impact of politics on economic policies and just the kind of things that could happen during elections and even after elections, it remains to be seen whether these trends will hold or because of either a change in regime or regimes remaining, whether there's going to be big or small differences in these numbers here in time to come. So thank you so much for your attention and your time for this chapter 3, where we covered Southern Africa. Uh, we have two more regions left, so I will let you guess which one I will be going to next. But if you've been following along, you can almost imagine where I'll be going to next. But until I see you again, and until we cover the next one, see you in chapter 4.